So I'm here with Rob Brooks of Rob Brooks Realty Property Management, and today we're going to be talking about Fort Walton Beach, specifically long-term rental investing in Fort Walton Beach. And we've done a couple videos on Pensacola in the past, and these are going to be a little bit different. We're taking a bit of a different angle here, and I think that there's good reason to do that. But before we get into that, Rob, if you want to kind of reintroduce yourself to the Fort Walton Beach crowd? Because I know your family goes way back in Fort Walton Beach.
Yes, it does. So we go back 4 generations. My great grandfather founded Fort Walton Beach, and but that's not necessarily reason people should do business with me or even listen to me. I think it's important for me to, um, on my own merits, with my own values, be someone who is worth taking advice from.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. One thing that I think works well is if we do a screen share and look at Google Maps together so we can also get some idea of the geography as well too. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So Rob, if you want to kind of describe the geography and the surrounding culture of Fort Walton Beach.
Sure, yeah, and to me, Fort Walton Beach is the closest to heaven as we will get on this earth before we pass away. But Fort Walton Beach as a whole has so much to offer because, in my opinion, is the perfect a combination of air, water, and land. And by that, I mean that there's a lot of activity with the military Air Force Base there, as well as the other military things that we can talk further about later. But and then the water is just exceptional in this area. You can see the emerald water that is to the south of these sugar white sand beaches, and it is very popular in Fort Walton for vacationers. They want to put their toes in that sugar white sand. They want to swim in that emerald water. And so they come over in droves to enjoy that. And the locals do it as much as they can. And a lot of times they come out to the beach when the tourists have gone home after the summer break. We're out there during the spring and fall quite a bit. And then there's these bays and bayous that are just beautiful parts of Fort Walton. We have many parks and waterfront residences that are on the bays and bayous and the intercoastal waterway. I was just talking with a person just minutes ago who is in near Montgomery, Alabama, and he wants to live on the intercoastal waterway here in Fort Walton Beach, and so we were talking about his possibilities there. That was just about 8 minutes ago before our meeting. So it is just a perfect blend of the air, water, and land. And so it's so beautiful in that way and so enjoyable with the different activities that are associated with those things.
Truly an unrated or a underrated part of Florida, in my opinion, is definitely this Northwest Florida coast, and Fort Walton Beach is certainly a gem. When we think about tenants, right? Tenants usually on the long-term side have to be employed, they have to work somewhere. What are some of the main pillars of industry in this area that really drive employment and settlement in the area?
Right. So many larger cities have a few pillars of industry. And here in Fort Walton, it's not considered a large city. There are two pillars of industry. One is the military, and we'll talk about more of that about that in a minute. And the other is tourism. So these people who come down. Fort Walton Beach is generally considered a drive to destination. A lot of the tourists that come here are from the surrounding states that usually take one day to drive to. So I'm talking the summer tourist. They'll spend 8 hours or 3 hours in the car to get here, anywhere from Montgomery to Atlanta to Nashville, or Texas. Texas will pass many beaches on the way to this beach right here. And so we get them from all over those areas. And when we do, they need help. They need servicing, whether it be restaurants or hotels or air conditioner broke or whatever it is. And we have just a legion of people to help them here in our area. As far as the military goes, how about zoom out on this map just a little bit? In fact, maybe quite a bit. So I want to show uh, in this area, well, not zoom in one more, if you will. So in this whole area, you can see from Fort Walton Beach being there at the bottom center, uh, Eglin Air Force Base land covers all that green area that extends all the way to Pensacola Bay on the far west and all the way to Freeport to the far east. So basically just north of Talkatahatchee Bay going all the way down. So they have an immense amount of land that is up there. That is the largest Air Force base in the world, by my understanding, and they do a lot of activity there. So that base has lots of personnel, and those personnel need places to live. Well, Fort Walton Beach is one of those few places that makes sense. The main gate to Fort Walton to Eglin Air Force Base is located just a little to the north of Fort Walton Beach. So most people have the options choose between Fort Walton Beach, Niceville, or Crestview in where to live when they are active military or contractors on Eglin Air Force Base. Hurlburt Field is a little bit to the left or to the west of Fort Walton Beach. So as we zoom in, that main entrance is off of Highway 98, and they do some special uh, research and things on that base as well. So, in fact, by the way, there's more personnel at that location, my understanding, than there is on the actual Eglin Air Force Base uh, the main location. So, there's a lot of personnel going both directions on weekday traffic in the morning and in the afternoon.
When we were filming our videos on Pensacola, we broke everything down by really neighborhood or borough and looked at it from a geographic perspective. And for these videos on Fort Walton Beach, we're actually breaking it down and kind of using, specifically on this video, active military personnel as the delineation rather than geographical. What was kind of the reasoning for that?
Sure. So while a larger city such as Pensacola, you might need 30 or 40 minutes to travel from one end of Pensacola to the other, and people will naturally choose to live near where they work. And so that makes geographic areas within Pensacola, as the example, where they some areas are different than others. Whereas Fort Walton Beach, if sent it is small enough to where you can just about get to the whole town within 15 minutes. It doesn't matter where you're at, you can drive and be within 15 minutes to the far end of town. Well, that being the case, there is no people trying to live near where they work. Instead, uh, people can live just about wherever they want in Fort Walton Beach and be satisfied. So it tends to be a little better to delineate between the types of end user. So who is your end user? Well, it's either going to be likely in Fort Walton Beach, it's going to be military or contractors that work on the base, or it's going to be service personnel. I mean, not personnel, but service people who work the service industry, whether it be hotels or restaurants or air conditioners or contractors of any sort to serve the people that are vacationing here or live here.
So when we're thinking about the military side, then kind of in the purview of this video, what are the factors that really have the tenants' ability to be able to stay and pay?
hmm Well, there's the BAH, which is the basic base housing allowance, which when someone is moving here in the military, then they are told how much money the military will give them as part of their pay for housing. Now, they can choose to rent for more or less than that amount. But in their minds, they know that this is something that the military has determined of this would get you an adequate property. And so their their mindset of that amount often allows them to do some shopping around that price range. And they're often um, higher than what a lot of the people in the service industry are able to pay. We'll talk more about that soon, but these military personnel, they're looking for one, what kind of access do I have to to their workplace, and two, how can I enjoy the amenities of Fort Walton Beach?
Mm. Yeah, when it comes to the investing side, certainly the BAH, the military housing allowance, um, it seems like it sets a floor under rents. Is there any pricing considerations when you're thinking about setting rents in this area where that comes into play as a factor, or is it not as much of a factor because you also have some of those service industry based tenants as well that affect the market?
Yes, so let's kind of go into a bit of a deeper dive into that, and let's talk actual numbers for what things seems to be going right now. And I know that just bear with me if you're listening to this and it's been a year or two since this has been recorded, because I know numbers can change. But this helps you in comparing the military versus the service industry. In the military, if it is above $2,500 a month, then it is not going to necessarily work for most military personnel. Uh, it will work for some because different rankings have different pays that are associated with it. So the $2,500 seems to be a top, and things below, say, 1,500 seem to be not the quality that the military tenant is desiring. Now, while eh, we're not drawing lines here in Fort Walton Beach, I will go ahead and point out a few areas. There is the Shalimar area, which is where Lake Lorraine is located, and that is hugely considered a military part of Fort Walton Beach. It is so close to Eglin Air Force Base, and many of the people who live there are military. They are retired military sometimes that are living there. I like to joke that someone, it would be one of the most foolish places on earth for someone to do a robbery in Shalimar, because I'm quite sure that it has such a high military concentration of people living there. Everybody has guns. A robber would be taking their life into their own hands in that area by entering a house. And so these areas that are just to the west of that, and they're in the heart of Fort Walton Beach. It's called Ocean City. And then you have a little to the south of that, lots of military people living in there. Over to the far northwest of Fort Walton is called the Wright area. And that Wright area has generally a little bit newer houses. These houses are built oftentimes anywhere from uh, 10 to 20 years old back to 40 years old. But they are built on some land that was, um, it was lower compared to some of the other higher elevations of Fort Walton Beach. So you just want to be sure that it has good drainage and that there's no storm issues there if you're an investor in that place. Going further south is the Mary Esther portion of Fort Walton Beach, and that is just to the right of the Hurlburt main gate. And there's lots of uh, there are some apartments there, and there are many places where people have retired military that are there. And then, while this isn't the main part of our focus in this video, but there is housing that is to the west of the Hurlburt main gate. That housing seems to have a lot lower price that is out there. However, it's not considered as desirable because there is quite a bit of traffic coming in the Highway 98 going into Hurlburt, going into Fort Walton in the morning, and then leaving there in the evening, and is the only way to get in and out of there. And so people want to avoid that traffic if they can. If they're in what I would call Fort Walton Beach proper, which is to the east of the Hurlburt entrance, then they won't have that problem at all. But Mary Esther, when people refer to Mary Esther, they know there's East and West Mary Esther. And so in this video, we're talking mainly East Mary Esther, which is a part of the greater Fort Walton Beach.
I can confirm 98 will have crazy traffic depending on the time of day. And if you go on any Facebook forum that's local, I'm sure you'll hear that as well. Uh, so what features or locations, and you've alluded to this already, but maybe we could put the final stamp on this. What features or locations for a house in Fort Walton Beach tend to appeal to the military tenant?
Right. So a lot of them need at least two bedrooms, preferably three. They depending on their family situation, and they certainly anticipate having guests from time to time. And a lot of times they want an office at their house. So a lot of times three bedrooms is what they prefer. They prefer a garage, and they need a place to put their nice car or their stuff, and so that's important to them. And they do enjoy being close to some of these amenities. Can we zoom in on the Okaloosa Island there at the bottom part of Fort Walton Beach? I'm just going to point out there along Santa Rosa Boulevard, which goes to the west of that main intersection after the bridge. There are seven different parks that are there on the beach that are open to the public, and they got parking, they have bathrooms, and that's not a large uh, a long beach stretch to have that many parks. But that is something that years ago Fort Walton Beach decided was important, and they're right. It's great that people who are near these places can enjoy the beach at their leisure, and they can even avoid crowds if they want to. So just look just north of the Brooks Bridge. All those houses are within just minutes of the beach. And so they could literally go to the beach and eat their lunch break there at the beach, and then be back to work on time or be back at the house. They could spend just a good 30 minutes, hour at the beach and come right back and go back to work or doing whatever they're doing. It's easy for them. And this stuff that is within a mile or two of the Brooks Bridge, that's about a 8-minute ride to all of that. And so all of Fort Walton is within 20 minutes of sticking your toes in the sand. So great amenities that the military tenant likes. They also like a lot of times newer houses. Some places in Fort Walton Beach don't offer that, so they'll settle for some houses that are just up to date on the inside. Even if they don't have the closet space, at least they have some updated flooring, updated colors, maybe updated cabinetry. Those are things that the military tenant is looking for.
All right, Rob, I've got a bit of a scenario for you. So if someone's got around 300,000 to put towards a Fort Walton Beach rental aimed at a military tenant, what does that ideal property look like, or what does that property look like?
Okay. So you probably at 300,000 probably will not be able to attract afford the properties that are to the easternmost part of Fort Walton. But there in the heart of Fort Walton, there are quite a few opportunities. And in fact, I have where I am notified every time a property comes up on the market that is 300,000 or below. And it's pretty much a daily thing. I get a new property that's come on the market. And these things are high possibilities for rentals. You want like I was saying earlier, the 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, the garage, and something that has a good roof, good air conditioner system, and then a lot of the cosmetics don't cost as much to to take care of in there. Neighborhoods vary, and as the neighborhoods in Fort Walton Beach all tend to be there's a few places that you want to check out a little more, but in general, they seem to work well in just about all of Fort Walton Beach.
Well, excellent. Well, this is going to be part one of a two video series. And on the next video, we're going to be really focusing on the hospitality industry and retired
Right?
military, especially. Anything else you want to say in closing, Rob, before we end this video?
No, Isaac, I appreciate your help. Thank you.